Now to a WCNC Charlotte investigation. So we have our Nate Morabito, who's been on a brand new report here, look at some mail thefts that have been going on in the Ballantyne area. And this is something that has caught the eye, it sounds like, of federal investigators.
Yeah, this actually came to our attention from a next door post. Some people were complaining about the Ballantyne post office. And when it came to my attention, I thought, that's interesting, but let's figure out what's really happening there. And so I started analyzing CMPD data and found that there had been more check theft reports at that post office than any other post office in Charlotte. And I thought, that seems really unusual. Like, why is this a coincidence? Is this a conspiracy? What's going on there? So we essentially found more than 24 reports tied to this in less than a year. And that eventually brought us to the home of a woman named Kathy Dorff. Let's take a listen.
I was shocked and I was angry, and you just don't think these things are going to happen. It's that old cliche, it's not going to happen to me. I thought I was being safe. I was going to the post office. I was following what I thought were the right steps. And so that was really upsetting. And then, of course, I thought, oh my God, now they have our account information, and that is scary. And so I went to the bank right away. They shut down the account, but one of the comments they made was, oh, this happens all the time. You're the third person this week. And that really surprised me, because I thought it was much more random than that. And the article that I had read is what prevented me from putting my mail in our mailbox. I thought, I'll go to the post office because that's safer, and that's where I'll put my mail. And then that's where it happened, obviously. So very luckily, they had done nothing, because the check was deposited May 12th. We didn't know until our accountant emailed me the end of June. So they could have done a lot of damage, and thank goodness they didn't.
So I don't know about you, Vanessa, but very rarely do I write a check.
Yeah.
Occasionally I have to for something. And same with Kathy for the most part. She was paying her tax accountant. It was a more than $3,000 check in May that she put in the mail and sent it off. She physically walked into the Ballantyne post office because, as you heard, she thought it was safer. Well, sometime after she deposited her mail, someone took the check. They washed the check, which is using some chemicals in a wash bin to take some of the ink off, and changed some of the information on the check to change who it was made out to. And then they deposited this money. So that's $3,000 that thankfully her bank made right for her. But as it stands, this case is inactive within CMPD. They've exhausted all leads, and that's really, in all honesty, most of these cases are considered inactive. Thus far, they've had trouble figuring out who's responsible. And here's what really gets me about this whole situation. In 2023, the federal government, in a grand jury, busted a worker at the Ballantyne post office for stealing business checks and then selling them.
Wow.
This all has happened since then.
Yes.
So they arrested someone, an employee, and now there's more and more thefts happening there. And these victims range from a 93-year-old to a church to several businesses who think they're doing the right thing, but their checks are getting stolen. And I think the fear is that these cases are not going to get solved. So we interviewed the U.S. Attorney for the Western District, Russ Ferguson, and we talked with him about this problem because it really is a massive problem in this region, mail theft. Here's what he told us.
It's a huge issue. The amount of people stealing checks out of the mail is alarming. And we're seeing we're seeing crime from that in many, many different ways. People are robbing postal carriers to get their keys to open the mailboxes. People are stealing mail, and people are taking checks out of the mail, washing the numbers off, and using those checks to defraud people out of money.
What is your level of involvement in trying to investigate and prosecute, hold people accountable for it?
We're very involved in holding people accountable, and you're exactly right. These cases started with people stealing checks, robbing mail carriers. Some of our recent cases have been people who actually work for the Postal Service and get jobs at the Postal Service to engage in that crime. And that's extremely alarming to us, because you can do everything they tell you to do. Take your check into the post office, but if you're handing it to a criminal on the other side of the desk, it's not going to work. So we've been very focused on prosecuting those cases and holding those people accountable, and letting people know that we're going to catch you. If you get a job at the post office to engage in crime instead of to help people, we're going to catch you.
And even before we interviewed the U.S. Attorney, we had reached out to the Postal Service and said, well, what's going on here? Can you give us an idea? They directed us to the Office of Inspector General. And the Office of Inspector General told us that they are aware of this issue at this post office and they are investigating it. We know there have been several cases in our region over the last year and a half tied to mail theft, several of them postal employees. And I just want to urge people to take a few precautions. Nothing is foolproof, but the more barriers you can kind of put up, the better. The recommendation is to bring your mail into the post office if you're going to mail it, if there's a check inside. Postal Service recommends that you deposit your mail at the last drop-off of the day. So there's only one time where they're going to come through and pick up your mail. Also, if you're going to write a check, this is, again, not 100% guaranteed, but if you use a gel pen, that ink has over time been harder to get out of a check, so that whatever you write, whoever you address it to, the hope is that they wouldn't be able to change it. And thank goodness for Kathy's case, they didn't change the dollar amount, because they really could have done that too. They didn't. They kept her signature, they changed everything else. And in that case, it was deposited in a specific bank, because the check said it has to only be deposited electronically to one bank. So her bank was able to contact the other bank to, just verify it and at least get her money. But they have yet to figure out who did this, which is kind of hard for me to figure out, because somebody deposited this money. You would think it'd be easier to track down, but these are very kind of intense kind of investigations that take a lot of work and sometimes a lot of time. And the U.S. Attorney's Office says it's a priority for them. I'm hopeful that no one else is going to fall victim, but based on recent history there, the alarm should be off for people that something is happening there at the Ballantyne Post Office.
Yeah, I guess I was going to ask, it's hard to say don't go to a certain post office, but...
It is hard to say that, number one. And no one is saying that. No one is urging people not to do it. But the mail has to go from that post office to somewhere else here in Charlotte, too. Mm-hmm. So we don't really know where this is happening. But this is what the beauty of technology is. There was a recent oversight hearing within Congress about a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, where the U.S. Postal Inspector and the USPS OIG talked about this new technology they're using too, to try to figure out where in the system these crimes are happening so that they can target that. And they've even talked about, trying to limit, backpacks on the floor of a sorting facility potentially, just to limit any way to take mail if it's happening internally. That is the concern, though, is that maybe in the past that's what was happening. U.S. Attorney says there was a person who worked there, who was taking the mail, and then who was selling it to other people. It was a big conspiracy scheme to try and take money from people, and it would have been successful had they not busted that case. The hard part here is we don't know how many other cases there are even out there, and these are just the people that report these crimes. That's one more thing the OIG will say as well. There's a hotline on their website where people can file complaints. This is the USPS OIG, Office of Inspector General. The sooner you file a complaint, the more likely that it could be solved. Sure, file a complaint with police, but also make sure the Postal Service knows as well, because I really feel bad for these people who are in a position where they're doing everything they're told to do, mm-hmm. and then they're still being victimized. And oftentimes you hear, well, there's not much we can do to solve this case. Yeah. And it almost becomes common, like, oh yeah, this is happening all the time. Okay, well, that's not really acceptable. What can we do to make this not the norm?
Yeah. My mind's kind of blown a bit.
It's so weird that it's one location with the most of these things happening. We're going to air a story tonight at 6 on this. You'll see our full report then. But it certainly is odd, to say the least.
It's odd, and definitely not linking them. I'm just more curious now that you've brought up the prior case. I just want to learn more about that too, just in general.
Yeah, I mean, apparently there are people who get jobs with the post office for this reason. That's what the U.S. Attorney told us. Now, the Officer Inspector General will say the majority of employees at the post office are great. They would never think about jeopardizing their career to steal mail, right? That's in most professions. That's the way it is,
Yeah.
right? But you get a few bad apples that spoil the bunch, and that's what Kathy says. I feel bad. They've tainted this location. There are some good people that work there, and now the reputation is one that I can't trust this place. And I think that's a really hard thing to reverse, especially when the Postal Service has had tons of funding issues, right? There's been a lot of conversation about that. And Congresswoman Virginia Foxx is also on the committee that was questioning the Postal Service a couple weeks ago from North Carolina. And she was asking, what can we do, what more can we do, you know, to make sure the mail is delivered safely without costing more money? So you have this issue of it's becoming more and more prevalent, it feels at least, but also in an effort to tighten the belt of government spending. And so how do you do both at the same time? I think is the question that some people might ask.
Yeah, really interesting. Looking forward to seeing more of your piece. You said 6 o'clock, right?
6 o'clock tonight, yep.
All right. Nate Morita, thank you so much
All right,
for
see you,
joining us
Vanessa.
here on
Yep.
Live Impact News. Folks,